I don't know that he needs a lot of introduction, but there may be one or two of you that don't know a lot about Blake Hall, so I'll give a little bit of an overview of Blake's background. He leads ID.me. Raise your hand if you don't know what ID.me is. I know it's going to kind of call you out, so I think everybody knows. All right, so every time I report on the stats, they're like a little bit late, but 140 million, is that a good number to use?
147.
The technology is being used to safeguard 20 federal agencies, 45 state agencies, and used by hundreds, what's an approximate number of like e-commerce sites and commercial sites?
700 to 800.
Yeah, 700 to 800. And it is literally growing at an astounding pace. ID.me is guided by a principle, that Blake's held dearly, where there's no identity left behind, ensuring everyone can access conveniently, securely digital services. Blake is a decorated military veteran. We've talked about that before. It's pretty astounding. Led a reconnaissance platoon in Iraq, over 450 combat patrols, earned 2 Bronze Stars, including 1 for heroism in combat. And he's accumulated quite a number of accolades over the last few years. 2019 CEO of the Year by One World Identity, 2020 Vanderbilt Young Alumni Achievement Awardee, 2022 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year for the Mid-Atlantic region, and most recently became a National Security Fellow for Vanderbilt's Institute of National Security. And he holds 11 patents in authentication and identity. Vanderbilt undergrad, he's a nerd. Graduate, undergrad, magna cum laude with a BS from Vanderbilt, Army ROTC, and an MBA from Harvard Business School. And when he graduated from there, that's about when we met, 2010. You say nice things about Craig and I can tell you that I've learned way more from you than I ever could have taught you. But I do love the relationship that we've developed, and I love what you're building. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about ID.me first, about where you are and what you're doing, and then we can dive into questions?
Sure. I mean, I just want to say it's amazing to be around a room full of great Americans, warriors, leaders of industry. It's always special. You don't feel that in every room that you go into in this country evermore. People who are dedicated to our way of life and to what it takes in terms of sacrifice to keep it safe. I'm so proud of you for assembling that community around you and what you and Craig have built over the last 10 years. And thank you for this format too. Like, I think initially I was scheduled to talk to you all, and that's just not how I like to do. I prefer much more of two-way, and Kelly and I have a very special relationship. I would not be an entrepreneur if it wasn't for this man to my right, who took me under his wing and mentored me when I had no idea what I was doing. And so there's that other Emerson quote about, giving back to people and how that's, the most sincere compensation of life. So it's always a pleasure to be up here. I feel like every year that goes by and I look back, I'm like, damn, like there was so much that I didn't know, that it's very humbling in the sense to think about all the things that you still have yet to learn to become an effective chief executive officer. And I know for some of you who've heard us talk before, hopefully we can cover some of those things that I didn't know coming into the year, that I've learned from just amazing entrepreneurs and leaders who've mentored me, and continue to learn from Kelly and Craig. But you all honored me too much yesterday. Appreciate you very much.
We did not honor you too much. Now, let's jump into something that I saw sparked an interest in you when you obviously pay attention to everybody, and one of the best leadership characteristics I think you exhibit this constant desire to learn. You knew exactly zero about identity when I met you, right? And now you're pretty much acclaimed worldwide expert on it. Brian Johnson last night, General Fenton and the Command Sergeant Major talked about the Emerson quote, right? An institution is the lengthened shadow of one man. What does that mean for you?
So I immediately thought of a quote from Alexander the Great. And Alexander was mentored by Aristotle. And he has this quote where he said, "I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. And I love that quote. So the Emerson quote was, an institution is the length of one man's shadow. And what I think Emerson was saying, I think what Alexander was saying, is that leadership starts at the top. When you lead an institution, you are a symbol of that institution. Who you are, your character, what you say, what you do. General Fenton is such an amazing and humble man. I mean, that was an amazing conversation I had the great fortune to have with him last night. But it is the shadow that you cast, for better or worse, and how long that is that dictates everything else underneath it. General Petraeus talks a lot about getting the big ideas right. And one of the things when I was in Iraq, like we didn't have the right leadership for DOD or for the military. It was all counterterrorism. And then you had General Petraeus come in, and if you talk to him for like 30 seconds, you're like, holy cow, the clock speed on this guy is amazing. And he's like, hey guys, it's not counterterrorism, it's counterinsurgency. Completely different doctrinal approach. And what happens? Like violence goes down, extrajudicial killings go down. You know, you start to actually have the opportunity for maybe political rapprochement within Iraq. And I saw that through my life and like experienced it day to day when I went through. So you have a tremendous responsibility as a leader. And it is incredible to have men like General Fenton and Command Sergeant Major Shorter who are setting that example every day and are too humble to ever speak about themselves in that way. So I'll do it for them. And that Emerson's quote applied to them, those men cast a very long shadow because of their expertise as warriors and the example that they set. And I think Alexander would not want to go up against an army of lions led by lions. And that's what we're very fortunate to have, is some leaders who are lions in this room.
Thank you. So if you look at where the vast majority of investable dollars are going and the opportunity and threat that exist with artificial intelligence, and you think about the business that you've built and where it is, you know, how does AI play into what ID.me is and what ID.me is becoming?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's part of the reason I'm a National Security Fellow now at Vanderbilt University. So General Paul Nakasone, who's the commander of Cyber Command and led the National Security Agency, and his deputy, General Tuna Moore, you know, I was like, what am I doing here? But we briefed them up on what we were seeing, and what we have is signal intelligence on a lot of non-signature nation-state attacks that are happening against this country. You know, we saw, for instance, a lot of attacks against USPTO, or the Chinese government has a bounty that if you can get a trademark, the Chinese government explicitly will incentivize and reward that. And for the longest time, I was like, well, why? Well, it turns out that what they're doing over on Amazon is that when you get this trademark, you can displace a U.S. seller through the mark, and you can backfill it with Chinese sellers. So it is, USPTO just canceled over 3,000 trademarks that had been issued with forged attorney signatures. So just this massive concerted campaign that they have as a state actor, where it starts in the public sector, but then it goes over to Amazon, is actually directly related at commerce. And you can even see some of these things like DeepSeek in the announcement, like more of a PR move to throw off the capital investment they're about to make in that sector. So I think, you know, like any other tool, what's really interesting about AI is there's two components to it. You have the inference layer, which is judgment, and there's some foundational models that are being created with OpenAI, with XAI, with Claude and coding, because intelligence is multidimensional, but like really, you know, foundational models. But the thing that not a lot of folks are focused on as much, but a lot of the AI folks who were down at Vanderbilt a few weeks ago are focused on, is the quality of the data model. You know, there's a lot of very smart people that have good judgment, but your judgment is only as good. It's a function of the context and the data that you have. If you don't have full context, you don't have data points, you're going to make a suboptimal decision. So what we are very fortunate to have is we have a lot of data about identity and about deepfake attacks and about attributes that, if cleanly structured with a user in control to give authorization to use it, you can have these AI agents that can go off and accomplish tasks for you that make your life easier. So we were just talking with Kelsey here about, like, you know, if you get married and you change your name, one of the benefits, if you have identity tied to a login, is that you could tell like an AI agent, just go change my name at all these different agencies to do that. And what the government would want to see is like, well, how do I know that it was Kelsey who gave permission? So identity is kind of the signature that allows for some of this friction to be taken out of your life to make life safer and easier. So what I'm spending most of my time on right now is our data architecture to make sure that as a platform, you can build on top of us. But at the same time, the use of AI for identity theft and fraud. There will be a clip that'll air on 60 Minutes pretty soon where a Chinese threat actor is attacking an individual, a real person in Pennsylvania, using stolen information, deep fakes to resemble the face of that individual. And it's really scary. Like they're hitting individual Americans to try to fraud the United States government. And so we can find those folks and show them the video, and hopefully it'll make for great local news because that's how our politics is centered. So we can fight back. But I guess the point of this is there is a defensive element where we need to protect people based on how our adversaries are going to exploit AI to attack us. And then there's an offensive element, which is how can we make life easier if we can keep people safe?
Awesome. Attracting and retaining critical talent is the key to, especially startups, but even right now as your multi-billion-dollar value, like what are the primary lessons learned, and how do you think about it differently than you used to in terms of adding team members?
Yeah, I think you've got to be really good at what you do. And so we talked a little bit about Elon, at Army Navy. He was my +1 the year before last. It's pretty crazy. The infinite selfie loop is a real thing when he walks into any crowd. So we had to save him from that. But the question that I was burning up to ask Elon, knowing how hard it is to build one company to billions of dollars, is I don't know if it's 8 or 9 or however many he's got. But I'm like, how? Like, how do you find the people? What's the selection process that you are able to have that span on companies? I mean, usually that's your direct reports. Like a very accomplished manager can do 7 to 10. How do you do 7 to 10 companies that are all worth tens of billions of dollars? And he said 2 things. He said whoever leads a function needs to be the most skilled at what that function is. He's like not necessarily the very best, but highly proficient at it. I would think about it like a sports team. Like the captain isn't necessarily the best player, but they're one of the best. And through their work ethic and their example, they have the credibility that the locker room defers and listens to them. You don't find that in a lot of companies. What you'll find in a lot of bigger companies is you'll find that politicians are able to actually rise to the top. And then usually behind every politician, there's actually their number 2 who's the executor and is actually getting shit done, whereas they're more of like the figurehead that are going through. This is what I saw in the military too, that your best warriors, your best generals usually aren't the best politicians, and it takes a moment of crisis like getting our butts whooped in 2006 where the cream rises to the top. So I think the actual most important thing is you need to make sure that whoever's leading a function is the most skilled and is skilled at that level of scale that they're ready to go. Because just like sports, high school, college, pros, you can be good at one level and not good at another. So Johnny Ive, this is Steve Jobs' philosophy, by the way, experts leading experts. He said, I don't lead people. He's like, they're just going to have a conversation with everybody about their life's dreams and like what they want. He's like, yeah, I care about people, but don't get me wrong. But he goes, I lead design because I'm the best at design. And I review work. And I know if somebody's good because I review their work and because I'm good at design. And I can help mentor them and give them feedback because I'm the best at design in Apple. And I know if they have potential because I'm good at design. And so Jobs, when he's leading at scale, he's spending over 40 hours of his week just doing product review. This is also how Zuckerberg leads Facebook and everything else. It's counterintuitive. They don't delegate. They're in the weeds. So the first thing is make sure that whoever leads the function is really good at that thing. This sounds simple. Most companies, though, get it wrong because politics and like tribal dynamics and being charming actually ends up outweighing being really good at what you do. The second thing is like, how do you test for that? And so he had this line, he said, well, I just ask them about their career and then I ask them to tell me about a problem that they solved. And he goes, then I ask them for a little bit more detail. Then I ask them for a little bit more detail. And the line was, no one can bullshit 3 layers deep. and I love that. So So actually, like from that conversation, what I took away, and I already, could be in rooms for hours with CTOs and CIOs by myself. I've closed some of the largest federal agencies personally, a lot of private sector agencies personally. But at this level of scale, I'm like, I lead an engineering company. And if I don't continue to acquire technical skill, I will not be worthy of my title. Like what Command Sergeant Major Shorter said about leadership is what I believe too. I don't believe in formal titles. I think that's bullshit. I think a formal title is a bet. I think the way that you make the bet pay off and you earn it is that the team would look at you and say, that's our leader. And so for me, I was like, all right, like I need to learn Postgres and database design and everything else. And I'm basically like going through a full-blown like CS degree right now. And as soon as I got into that, turns out there's a lot of similarities between financial modeling and like how relational databases are organized. The classics of management went up where I was like, hey, like who owns this entity as an object? And all the teams are looking at me like okay.
How did he know how to ask us that?
Yeah. And I'm like, third normal form. Like, what are we doing for data governance to make sure that that's in shape and that we're building through APIs and the language is standardized and now I know what to do with that. This is classic leadership where it's like, all right, if no one's responsible, then you have this like kind of black market for getting stuff done that ends up not putting you in a position where you can scale. And so between stripping out layers of management, developing skill, and going straight to a problem that you can diagnose and then get your experts in on, that's actually how you go fast. And if you can diagnose the most important problem in your company every week for 52 weeks, it's amazing. We're moving faster than we ever have before in the last 6 or 7 months, and it's because a lot of the lessons that he taught me about people and selection. And the last part I would say is like the world will try to dilute you. It'll always try to dilute you. Especially if you're type A and you are all gas and no brakes, it will always try to dilute you. People will be like, oh, it shouldn't be this intense or it shouldn't be this. And like, fuck that. It's 100%. And so just giving yourself the permission that when you find your tribe and your humans, like people who aren't like you, let them self-select out, be unabashed about who you are. It is amazing that when you bring that intensity and that energy and you amp up the team, everyone wants to follow you and do more for you and work harder because the mission at the core matters. And so anyway, I'm super grateful to him. He's been wonderful to me. And I think a lot of what I learned in Harvard Business School was just 100% wrong.
So Jensen gets a lot of press all the time, but got a lot of press, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago when he talked about founders mode. And it sounds like, and I've watched you over the last 4 years, turn your attention from department to department, like you said, where focus on where the issue is and go find it and figure it out. And, I think there's a lot of stuff that you can read that would say, oh, that's micromanaging if you can't do it. And I just heard you say, fuck that, go to the root cause of whatever's wrong yourself with no apologies and go solve.
That's right. Okay. And the thing is, you can see it from all the best CEOs. So Frank Slootman, Snowflake and ServiceNow, and he said the most common mistake that he sees from young executives is that they hire people who are very talented and look great on paper. They delegate, they sit back, and they wait for greatness. And guess what? It never comes. It never comes. The best ones, Bill Gates sat in every single product review. Zuckerberg's in it. Larry Ellison still runs product strategy. If you have the vision and you see what it is, you're the integrator. You can diagnose if this is aligned or if it's not aligned. And the farther away you get from it, if your feedback loop is every quarter when you're at the board and you've missed it, that sucks. If it's weekly, where the critical path work is being reviewed weekly, then your feedback loop is like 72 to 96 hours. And this stuff that Elon's getting flack about for the emails, that's actually like a glass half empty person. What the people who are actually making progress and doing good work, they get promoted. And that's what you want in a meritocracy. And if people don't even know what to write down, then they probably don't know what their job is, and they're certainly not adding impact, right? So it's not just the accountability. Like, nobody should be above accountability or transparency. Nobody, including me, as a CEO. It's how I lead. I invited my VPs to the board, and they're like, oh my God, like the transparency, like you lead with a lot of stuff that you got wrong. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I don't do, myself. Like, this is the only way to do it, is to expose yourself and to get it all out there, because the goal is to learn as fast as you possibly can. And the thing is, like, and again, it's very simple. If the hardest problems have the most skilled experts, the hardest and the most important problems have the most skilled experts working on them as fast as possible, then that is what makes the company move the fastest. And that's why I think some of these like young engineers like love working at these different companies, and he's able to attract such talent, because you could be 23 years old and brilliant. And if you find yourself in the critical path for some really hard problem that is the thing that SpaceX needs to solve, or XAI or Tesla or whatever, Elon Musk is going to show up in his jet along with like all of the kind of special operations forces team that is expert in that thing, and they're going to sit down with you and they're going to fix it. And I think that amount of leadership that is based on skill and merit, and moving, what Napoleon told his generals, like march to the sound of the guns. All of a sudden, when you hear how they're teaching leadership at scale, which is counterintuitive, all these quotes of wisdom from great leaders just start to like point back to the same thing, which is like, go to the most important problem, go to where the action and the friction is, and different parts of your company will break at different times, and that's why it's really hard to be the CEO at different phases, because like go-to-market will break, and then as go-to-market gets back in shape, well now like product can't keep up with all the things that go-to-market wants, and you go back to product and you're like, what's going on over here? And then so you're never actually done. You're just constantly going around a wheel, and you're trying to figure it out. And then you've got layers. The people who can be really good at one level are not good. And so the most common mistake I've made is over promoting someone who's really talented before they're ready. And that's actually devastating. It's devastating for them. It's devastating for the organization. It's devastating for me, because like with more time and training and mentorship, they could have been good. But yeah, and in order to figure out what's breaking and why, and then how to fix it, you just have to be a learning machine and be voracious about that stuff.
So, ID Me becoming an iconic brand, 147 million, registered, credentialed wallets. Started off as Troop Swap. So, pivots is the friendly way of saying, "Oh fuck, change direction completely," right? How do you manage, one, decide it's time for a pivot, and two, manage that expectation to the people who gave you money to be Troop Swap, that you're now going to be Troop ID? Oh, wait a second, we're actually going to be ID Me. Like, for the founders who are in the process of pivoting or know that one's coming up, what's some words of wisdom on that path?
Yeah, so I was just at HBS actually talking to a lot of the kids who want to do entrepreneurship about the first couple years, and there were just folks who were amazing that wrote me checks even though they didn't believe in the business model. Kelly would take me around Army Navy and just like twist people's arm to write $25,000 and $50,000 checks. That's largely how we put together the angel round as well.
Hard pimping action.
Yeah, a lot of hard pimping.
Look at this guy.
Yeah,
I got one from the guy standing in the doorway back there.
Let's go. It's worked out pretty well. So, yeah, and then like I think I've told some of you before, like people would write me checks and they would say, Blake, I don't believe in the business model, but I believe in you. This is my daughter's college fund, and here's her picture. And I was like, wait. I'm just trying to process the feedback that you think I'm totally like on the wrong course, but you're still, what is that? And so I think the reason that people were willing to do it is again, back to what General Fenton and Command Sergeant Major Shorter were talking about, which is rehearsals. I approached the Troop Swap in a young company, not as like, this is what the plan's going to be, but the same way that I plan military patrols, which is all about contingencies. I said, these are my fundamental assumptions. And with the capital that you've given me, I'm going to be able to run experiments. And honestly, the more experiments I can run in the same amount of time, the faster we're going to learn. And I view entrepreneurship as legal insider trading. You can learn insights about the market that are counterintuitive, that nobody else knows. And once you've learned those insights, that's when a good entrepreneur knows how to exploit it. That's what a good military commander knows what to do. Like if I see that you've left a gap in your perimeter, I know what to do with that. And so I think it was just setting out like, this is what I believe, and if I learn that this isn't true, I'm going to adapt to that. That I have, I think Ben Horowitz, strong opinions that are weakly held. But it was crazy. Like that time. So the only time I've ever thought about quitting was February 2011, when I told you, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. And you were like, never say that ever again, especially not to an investor.
We had a few of those. Yeah.
And then, right after that, I put a U-Haul in the back of my GMC Sierra. I drove from Boston to DC in the middle of a blizzard. I had a mattress. I signed a $48,000 lease in this townhome near DuPont Circle on Swan Street. I had $5,000 in my personal checking account. I had $8,000 for the business. The guy actually was a San Francisco guy. He was like, I should probably do this in equity. And I was like, probably should. He probably should have. Yeah, $50,000. But then like 2 months later, because of Kelly, and then I randomly sat next to a guy. I never get upgraded to first class, but I got upgraded to first class in this flight. I sat next to Larry Cochran, who's an early rack space investor from San Antonio, or I can see Vic, who played a similar role for our Series A later on. And he wrote a check for $75,000. That's how we got to our first close, just like 2 months later. And the way we made revenue for that year, because we were doing like the daily deal stuff, was I'd met a Lego executive at Toy Fair in New York, because I was trying to put together like all the different companies that had programs that serve the military. And he just calls me up randomly. It's like, I don't know, December 2nd or 3rd. And he goes, hey, Lego never does this. He goes, but I've got a lot of inventory, and we'll give it to you for like 25 or 30% of retail, and you can resell it at whatever you want as long as it only goes to the military. I was like, okay. He goes, but you have to be in Dallas tonight, and you have to sign this invoice like right now and wire the money. And I was like, okay, done. So I signed that invoice. I flew to Dallas. I rented a Penske truck. I backed that sucker up to the warehouse. I drove from Dallas to DC without stopping where the team was waiting. We sold all the stuff on the website, and that's how we beat our revenue plan in 2011, right before we pivoted. So I'm looking at all these Harvard kids. I'm like...
Well, so for your founders out there that are whining, this is what we expect, right?
Where there's a will, man, and my will is strong. That's why, I think the team follows me. But yeah, I'm looking at these HBS kids, and I'm like, I don't know what lesson you will take away from that, because I'm not sure what lesson I take away from that. But if you're in the fight, be all the way.
So less than 20% of founders remain at the CEO role by the time the Series C hits. And you've led ID.me to, multi-billion-dollar status. We'll hear from another one that's taken it all the way through to IPO, Scott Painter, up here later today. Yeah. How do you think you've grown your leadership capabilities and your leadership style, going from, humping a truck full of Legos across country to sitting in, prepping meetings for IPO and that kind of stuff with the financial wizards, or being the expert on identity at major conferences?
I'll just start by saying it's been deeply humbling. You hit different levels of scale where you were very successful at the level before, and then all of a sudden you just realize it's going to take everything you have to be okay and then to be good. So from 2019 to 2022, we grew at over 600%, was our 3-year growth rate. And everything in the company broke, and like I've got a little bit of swagger to me, and like feel like I've led teams through some pretty tough situations and everything else. But that just really sucked. I mean, everything, my leadership team was completely out of their depth at the time. We had systems that needed to be fully like redesigned and re-architected for scale. And we had great investors at Viking Global Investors and Capital G who gave, feedback and advice. And there was one conversation I had with Brian Rose where he goes, hey, Blake, he goes, I think if you were to go talk to your sales team, they don't actually know what their job is and what they're supposed to do. And I was like, that's bullshit, like blah, blah. I'm protecting my sales leaders, everything else. And then I went back and I talked to them and I was like, it's like kind of a reverse Office Space where it's like, what would you say it is that we do here together as a team? And like they're like, so I'm like, oh man, I suck. So I went back and I was like, thank you for giving me that feedback and for caring about me, because it was always from a place of caring and wanting to get better. And I said, why would you still, believe in me after seeing me being a little defensive and cocky and everything else? And he said, well, he goes, listen, we underwrite like younger, brilliant founders all the time. And he goes, and what you have is you have the product and the market expertise, but there's a learning curve on the other parts of running a business at scale. And we are willing to underwrite that learning curve as long as you are learning and as long as there's humility. And that's just amazing to have that relationship with investors that are like that, because the more that you can open yourself up to that, like folks around you already know what you are good at and what you suck at. And if you are willing to put your ego to the side and to just, from Platoon, take the pain, if you're willing to take the pain, then you can actually grow and get better as a leader. So I think, from having Kelly around as a mentor from the start, and Craig as well, and just everything that you've done for me, and continuing to surround myself with great investors that care about the mission, and honestly have a long-term view that I do have some scarce things that make me credible, but I also have a lot to learn as a young leader, and you're going through that journey together. It was really important. And so I would say I am more aware than ever before of how hard it is to lead at scale. And I'm doing my life's work. I think the bigger the institution is that your shadow is being cast over, the more responsibility that you have to be good. And to be a good general manager, you have to be proficient at literally everything that company does to be able to supervise and audit and ask the right questions. So my life is pretty intense right now. I work 16, 17-hour days, no joke. I have like, my life is like my wife, my kids, horses, and soccer, and it's the company, and it's nothing else. And I'm doing, we have a mission at the core that is a worthy mission. And that's why people are willing to bleed for it. Not for me, but for the mission. It's what the military enjoys as well. But to earn my title every day, I am literally giving everything that I have mentally and physically. The last year has felt like a combat deployment to architect the shape of the company and to get our whole speed right, so that as the tailwinds of fraud and agentic systems and AI, that we are ready to be the identity layer and the platform that powers that. But it is, it is challenging in a very cerebral way that I haven't experienced before. But I'm so grateful to have you and other people around me who are smart in different ways that are guiding me down the right path.
Well, you're definitely inspiring. Any questions from the crowd? We can take a few questions right now from a timing standpoint. Yes, sir, Rupert, who came the farthest to this event.
So often, I just want to fire everybody and start all over again. I feel like we're not fast enough because we've got too many people, we're too slow. How does that feeling ever go away as you get to your sort of scale?
No, it does not. Yeah, I think a lot of this, but then I think, when I get that frustrated, usually what happens is I fuck something up. So part of it is a team. Like, you have to, there's a difference between capability and skill. And like, you can take a bet on somebody that is a little bit beyond where they're at right now if they can turn capability into skill in a timeline that's reasonable. But usually there's a communications gap. So we were just going over, we have a lot of like pricing issues and stuff too. And like, we had a product manager that's going straight to go to market. And I was like, hey, like, what do you think ops does? Like, ops exists to be the clearinghouse, right? And but then I'm like, did I communicate that? Did our head of operations communicate that? Was I crystal clear? And usually, if you look in the mirror first, I think more often than not, it's communications failures about what the process is and training and certification that underlines a lot of it. I think the best companies are defined by consistency, and they are consistent because they define processes and systems that make it easier for lower skilled talent to work there and to be successful. And so, so there's a science and an art to it. There's like, am I really talking? Is it the Spaceball scene where like I'm surrounded by assholes, or is it like I've really messed it up and I haven't like they can't read my mind, and so I think you got to be really clear about going into both sides of it.
So even with that eloquent answer, he said, "It's your fault, Rupert." Yeah, Paige.
Well, who hired him, right?
Like we're seeing a lot of veterans getting out, and you went through this a decade ago. What is your advice to these veterans getting out building startups? What did you learn that you think is most useful to a veteran who got out in the last year or two, or just got out, got their money? What do they need to do those first couple of years?
Yeah, well, I think so. Maybe I'll talk generally first, and everyone who's served in the military knows this. Like, to be entrusted with a platoon when you are 22 or 23 years old and know absolutely zero about life is an incredible thing to have happen to you in terms of how quickly you grow and develop and the amount of responsibility and everything else. Like, you accelerate past your peers in terms of leadership and management because you have to, because those folks aren't typically going to get that same level of responsibility for 7, 8, 9 years, maybe even longer before they lead that many people. There's a lot of data and research that shows that the most successful Harvard Business School classes graduate into the worst economies. And so when McKinsey and Goldman and all these consulting and banker shops aren't hoovering up talent, and that talent actually bets on itself and like starts companies, you have outsized job creation, you have outsized productivity, you have amazing entrepreneurs. So I guess the insight, this isn't true for everybody, so I'd be hesitant to give this to veterans broadly, but if you are truly exceptional and on some dimension of the bell curve, you're in the top 5%, you should always bet on yourself. Because it's not a guarantee, but like the ceiling of what your life could be in terms of the positive impact you make on the world is amazing. I think for folks broadly, it's this intersection of skill and passion, being self-aware of what you are uniquely good at and credible at, and what you're passionate about for a problem that matters to the world. And again, a lot of entrepreneurs will pick things they're passionate about, but they're not particularly good at, or things they're good at, but not particularly market for it. This is where you end up with a bunch of useless college degrees and stuff too. You can see it in the world. So I think finding that nexus, no matter what it is, like I think a lot of former soft personnel and everything else who might not want to do the Moonshots thing, they could be amazing operators in like a franchise type model where, who's going to out execute somebody coming from that community? I think those are great opportunities. So it always depends on like the nature of the product you're dealing with as far as the person. But I would say if you can find that groove, all gas, no brakes.
Blake, as always, that was incredibly inspiring, and thank you for everything that you continue to do for us.
Thanks, brother.
I can ask you, dude.